Ladies and gentlemen, federal employees, how do you take your TSP? How do you turn that into an income source to supplement your pension, your Social Security, your first supplement? How do you do that in retirement? Because we love having a big lump sum in TSP, but a lump sum normally doesn't do much for us. We want an income source like we had while we were working, a paycheck that is consistent so that we can live our lives. How do we make that happen with the TSP? That's what we're going to talk about today. If you're new to the channel, welcome. So good to have you. My name is Dallin Hawes. I'm a financial planner who helps federal employees all day long with this kind of stuff, retirement stuff, benefit stuff, tax stuff, all that stuff, okay? Let's dive into it. Number one, the first question you have to ask before thinking about taking money out of your TSP is, do you even have access to it when you're going to retire? For example, the default age that you have to be able to pull withdrawals out of your TSP without penalty is 59 and a half. That is the default age that you have to be to pull money out of the account without penalty. Now, you can pull it out before, you just have a 10% penalty is on top of any taxes you might owe as well. However, fortunately, there are exceptions to this 59 and a half rule. Number one, there is the rule of 55. If you retire or leave the government in the year you turn 55 or later, you can gain access to TSP before 59 and a half. So for example, if you're 57, you have 30 years of service, you're fully eligible, so you retire, you can take TSP withdrawals right then, no problem. And the age actually goes down to age 50 if you are a special provision employee. So that's air traffic controllers, law enforcement, you folks, you know who you are, firefighters. And it can be even lower if you retire with a full special provision retirement before age 50. Okay, but that's only for special provision, which isn't most people. For most people, it's age 55. Now, let's say you're a traditional FERS, okay? So not special provisions, okay? Not special provisions. Let's say you retire or you just leave the government at 53, let's say. So you didn't quite make it to 55, you left at 53. Or maybe you took a VERA, a voluntary early retirement authority, and early out at 53, let's say. Well, you might think, hey, I just got to wait 2 years to be able to access TSP at 55. And that is incorrect. I wish it was that simple. The rule of 55 is all or nothing, meaning you've got to retire in the year you turn 55 or later, or you got to wait all the way till 59 and a half. So if you leave before 55, even under a VERA, you can't access TSP without penalty until 59 and a half. So be wary of that. Number one, can you access it without penalty? And by the way, the Roth TSP, okay? So as you know, the TSP has two sides. It's the traditional side and the Roth. The Roth TSP has its own rules. To be able to take Roth withdrawals out of the Roth side, tax-free, because that's one of the perks of the Roth, is that you could pull money out and it comes out tax-free, right? That's the perks. But you have to meet the criteria to be able to do that. And the rule is you have to be 59 and a half and have had the account open for at least 5 years. So if you've had the account open for at least 5 years and over 59 and a half, then you can take tax-free withdrawals from the Roth. Okay? So, to recap all this, to take money from the traditional or the Roth penalty-free, you got to be at least 55. To pull money from the Roth tax-free, you got to be over 59 and a half and have had the Roth TSP open for 5 years. Okay? So that's the first question. Access. And as you see, it gets a little more complicated than most people think. Do you have access without penalty? Next, how do we change your TSP into a paycheck? How do we do that? Well, there's lots of different ways to do it. But in my opinion, the best way to do it is by keeping it simple. And the 4% rule is a great way to estimate how much you can reasonably withdraw from your TSP every year without worrying about running out. let's do an example. Let's say you've got $1 million, because it makes my math easy. If you've got $1 million, if you multiply that by 4%, the 4% rule, you get 40 grand, $40,000. And what the 4% rule says is, if you, year one, take out 4%, in this case, 40,000, and then year two, you take out the original amount, so 40,000, increase it by inflation. Let's say inflation was 3%, so 40,000 plus 3%. Then you keep doing that every year. So every year you take the previous year's amount plus inflation. If you do that, the odds of you running out during a retirement, the odds of you running out of money is basically zero. Basically zero. It's a fantastic rule of thumb. Now, is the 4% rule perfect? No, it's not perfect. You can, if you just Google online, you'll find a bunch of people that say different things about the 4% rule, but it is relatively conservative, and it's a safe place to go for planning purposes. Say, hey, I've got this much in my TSP. How much can that produce for me? So, if you have $1 million and you can take 40 grand out a year, 40,000, divide that by 12 to get a monthly number, and take out a chunk for taxes as well if you're pulling from the traditional TSP. Do that math for yourself to figure out how much you can actually take home every month from your TSP. And then you can tell TSP, hey, I want a monthly withdrawal of X. And they will do it. Of course, they'll withhold money for taxes like they do if you're pulling from the traditional side. But in a nutshell, that's one way to create an income source from the TSP. Figure out with the 4% rule how much you reasonably can, because guess what? Let's say you've got $1 million and you take out 100 grand a year. That's 10%. Your money's probably not going to last that long. You're going to deplete it too fast. So you want to do a conservative withdrawal rate like the 4% rule that will work for you. Okay? Last but not least, when pulling money out of your TSP, most of you have most of your money in the traditional side, the pre-tax side. And again, when you pull from that side, the traditional TSP, you have to pay taxes. And so you got to be wary about how much you're pulling out, especially if you want to take out a big lump sum in one tax year. For example, maybe you're buying a vacation home or a boat, or you're paying off your mortgage, or whatever it may be. If your income is normally at this amount, and then boom, you take a huge amount out, it may spike your tax bracket. It may increase how much you have to pay for Medicare Part B premiums. It can have a bunch of problems like that, okay? Depending on where you're at. Now, I don't know your tax bracket. I don't know where you're at, but it certainly could. And so you want to be wary of a bunch of peaks and valleys. If in retirement you got a bunch of ups and downs of income because these big withdrawals, then you're probably going to pay more in taxes over your retirement than you have to. But if you're able to smooth things out, generally that's the best way to save taxes, is when you got smooth income throughout. If you got big ups and downs, you're probably paying the IRS more than you have to. So food for thought there when it comes to taking your TSP, making sure you got access without penalty, changing it to a income source, and making sure you pay as little in taxes throughout retirement. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.